The November rain drummed against the cracked windows of the old brownstone on Corktown's Michigan Avenue, each drop seeming to echo the heaviness that had settled over 17-year-old Marcus Thompson's shoulders. He sat hunched over his worn wooden desk, the yellow glow of a single lamp casting long shadows across pages of calculus homework that might as well have been written in ancient hieroglyphs for all the sense they made to his tired mind. "Marcus, get down here now!" The sharp voice of his Aunt Dolores cut through the thin walls like a knife through butter, carrying with it the familiar edge of irritation that had become the soundtrack to his life for the past 3 years. He closed his textbook with a soft thud, the sound seeming unnaturally loud in the cramped bedroom he shared with his younger cousin Trevor. The space barely fit 2 twin beds, a shared dresser, and his makeshift study corner, a card table he'd found abandoned on the street and covered with a tablecloth his late mother had embroidered with small blue flowers. The stairs creaked under his weight as he descended, each step taking him closer to what he knew would be another confrontation. The smell of burnt coffee and cigarettes hung thick in the air, mixing with the perpetual mustiness that seemed to cling to every surface in the house, despite his aunt's constant complaints about cleanliness. Dolores stood in the narrow kitchen, her arms crossed over her faded Detroit Lions sweatshirt, her graying hair pulled back in a ponytail that had seen better days. At 45, she looked older, worn down by years of working double shifts at the automotive parts factory and raising 3 children on wages that never seemed to stretch far enough. "I got a call from your school today," she began, her voice carrying that particular tone that made Marcus's stomach clench. "Something about you missing detention again." Marcus shifted his weight from one foot to the other, his sneakers, hand-me-downs from his cousin that were half a size too small, squeaking against the linoleum floor. "I had to work, Aunt Dee. Mr. Rodriguez needed me to stay late at the community center. The after-school program was short-staffed, and those kids ain't your responsibility." Dolores's voice rose, causing baby Christina to stir in her high chair. "You think volunteering at some run-down community center is gonna put food on this table? You think it's gonna pay for that fancy college you keep talking about?" The words hit Marcus like physical blows. He'd heard variations of this speech countless times since moving in with his aunt after his mother's death from cancer. Every conversation seemed to circle back to money, to burden, to the constant reminder that he was an unwelcome addition to an already struggling household. "I'm trying to help," Marcus started, but Dolores cut him off with a harsh laugh. "Help? Boy, you want to help? Get a real job. Stop wasting time with those pipe dreams about college and face reality." She took a long drag from her cigarette, the smoke curling around her words like poison. "Your mama filled your head with all sorts of nonsense about being special, about making something of yourself. But look where that got her. Dead at 38 with nothing but medical bills and false hopes." The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus felt something crack inside his chest, a familiar pain that never quite healed. Through the thin walls, he could hear the Garcias next door watching their evening telenovela, the rapid Spanish mixing with canned laughter from some sitcom playing in another apartment. "You know what you are, Marcus?" Dolores continued, her voice dropping to a cruel whisper that somehow hurt worse than her shouting. "You're a mistake. Your mama's biggest mistake. She threw away her life for some smooth-talking man who disappeared the minute he found out she was pregnant, and now I'm stuck cleaning up the mess." Trevor appeared in the doorway, his 8-year-old face scrunched with confusion and concern. "Mom, why are you yelling at Marcus? He helped me with my homework today." "Get back to your room, Trevor!" Dolores snapped without taking her eyes off Marcus. "This doesn't concern you." Marcus knelt down and put his hand on Trevor's shoulder, forcing a smile that felt like it might crack his face. "It's okay, little man. Go finish watching your cartoons. I'll check on your math problems later." As Trevor reluctantly retreated, Marcus straightened and met his aunt's glare. The kitchen felt smaller than ever, the yellowed walls seeming to press in from all sides. Outside, a car backfired, the sound sharp and sudden in the early evening quiet of the neighborhood. "I know you never wanted me here," Marcus said quietly, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "But I'm trying my best. I maintain a 3.8 GPA, I work 20 hours a week at the center. I help with Trevor and Christina whenever you need. Your best ain't good enough, Dolores interrupted, stubbing out her cigarette in an overflowing ashtray. Your best is still costing me money I don't have. Food, utilities, clothes, it all adds up. And for what? So you can pretend you're better than where you came from. Marcus felt the familiar burn of tears behind his eyes, but he'd learned long ago not to let them fall in front of his aunt. Crying was weakness, and weakness was just another thing she could use against him. Instead, he focused on the steady tick of the wall clock, counting seconds like heartbeats. I'm going to finish my homework, he said finally, turning toward the stairs. Yeah, you do that, Dolores called after him. But don't come crying to me when reality hits and you realize all that studying was for nothing. Some people are meant for greatness, Marcus, and some people are just meant to be mistakes. Back in his room, Marcus sat on the edge of his bed and stared at the framed photograph on his nightstand. His mother at his 8th grade graduation, her smile radiant despite the fatigue that cancer had already begun to etch into her features. Next to it sat a letter from Wayne State University, an early acceptance based on his academic performance and community service hours. The rain continued its relentless percussion against the window, washing the streets clean, while inside, Marcus felt anything but cleansed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to prove his worth or confirm his aunt's harsh assessment. But tonight, in the quiet darkness of a room that never quite felt like home, he held onto the one thing Dolores couldn't take away, his mother's unwavering belief that he was destined for something more than the narrow confines of other people's expectations. The fluorescent lights of Jefferson Community Center flickered intermittently, casting an uneven glow over the gymnasium where Marcus had spent countless hours over the past 2 years. The building, a converted warehouse from Detroit's industrial heyday, bore the scars of decades of neglect, peeling paint, water stains on the ceiling, and heating that worked sporadically at best. Yet for Marcus, it had become more of a home than the cramped brownstone where his aunt's words still echoed like a persistent headache. Marcus, can you help me with this math problem? 8-year-old Jayla tugged at his sleeve, her worn sneakers squeaking against the polished concrete floor. Her homework was spread across one of the folding tables that served as the after-school program's makeshift classroom, surrounded by a dozen other kids ranging from 6 to 14. Of course, Jayla, let's take a look. Marcus knelt beside her chair, his voice automatically shifting to the patient, encouraging tone he'd perfected over months of volunteer work. The problem was simple division, but he could see the confusion in her dark eyes, the same look he remembered having when his own homework felt impossible. I don't get it, she whispered, her small voice barely audible over the chatter of other children working nearby. Numbers just don't make sense to me. Maybe I'm just stupid like my dad says. Marcus felt his chest tighten. How many times had he heard similar words from these kids? How many times had he felt the same way himself? Hey, look at me, Jayla. He waited until she met his eyes. You're not stupid. Sometimes our brains just need to learn things differently. Let me show you a trick my mom taught me. As he guided Jayla through the problem using colored pencils to visualize the division, Marcus noticed Mr. Rodriguez watching from across the room. The community center director was in his mid-50s, a former Detroit public school teacher who'd left the classroom to start this program 5 years ago. His salt and pepper beard couldn't hide the smile that spread across his weathered face as he observed Marcus's patient instruction. Marcus, can I see you for a minute? Mr. Rodriguez called out once Jayla had successfully solved 3 problems on her own, her face beaming with pride. They walked to the small office that doubled as a supply closet, past walls covered with children's artwork and achievement certificates. The space smelled of cleaning supplies and hope, an odd combination that Marcus had grown to associate with possibility. Sit down, son. Mr. Rodriguez gestured to a mismatched chair across from his cluttered desk. I've been watching you work with these kids for almost 2 years now, and I have to say, you have a gift. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. Compliments still felt foreign, like clothes that didn't quite fit. I just try to help where I can, Mr. Rodriguez. These kids remind me of myself when I was younger. That's exactly what I'm talking about. The older man leaned forward, his hands clasped, You see yourself in them and they see something in you they can aspire to become. Do you know how rare that is? Through the office's small window, Marcus could see the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the center's courtyard, where a few teenagers were shooting basketball despite the November chill. The rhythmic bounce of the ball mixed with their laughter, creating a soundtrack of normalcy that stood in stark contrast to the tension that perpetually filled his aunt's house. "Mr. Rodriguez, I appreciate what you're saying, but nothing. Listen to me, Marcus." The director's tone grew serious. "I've been in education for 30 years. I've seen thousands of kids come through programs like this. Most of them are here because they need help, need guidance, need someone to believe in them. But every once in a while you find a kid who's here because he needs to give help, needs to guide others, needs to be the one others believe in. That's you." Marcus felt a familiar burning behind his eyes, the same sensation he'd experienced the night before when his aunt's words had cut so deep. But this time, the burn came from something entirely different, a warmth that started in his chest and spread outward like sunlight breaking through clouds. "I got a call today," Mr. Rodriguez continued, reaching into his desk drawer and pulling out a manila folder. "From the mayor's office. They're planning a youth achievement ceremony next month, recognizing young people who've made significant contributions to their communities. Someone nominated you." The words seemed to hang in the air like smoke, impossible to grasp. Marcus stared at the folder, his mind struggling to process what he'd just heard. "Nominated me? For what?" "For your work here. For the tutoring program you started last year. For organizing the back-to-school supply drive that helped over 200 kids. For being here every day, even when you had detention, even when you were exhausted from your part-time job at the grocery store." Mr. Rodriguez opened the folder, revealing official letterhead from the city of Detroit. "They want to give you the Youth Community Leadership Award." Marcus's hands trembled as he reached for the letter, the words swimming slightly as he tried to focus. His name was there, in official type, alongside phrases like exceptional dedication and positive impact on Detroit's youth. At the bottom, in bold letters, it mentioned that the ceremony would be broadcast live on the local news. "I don't understand," Marcus whispered. "Who would nominate me?" Mr. Rodriguez smiled, the expression crinkling the corners of his eyes. "That's confidential, but I can tell you it wasn't just one person. Several parents wrote letters, some of the kids you've worked with, even a few teachers from your school who noticed how you always seemed to be helping other students." The basketball bouncing outside had stopped, replaced by the distant hum of rush hour traffic on Michigan Avenue. Marcus thought about Jayla's face when she'd solved those math problems, about 12-year-old Antoine who'd started reading chapter books after Marcus had spent weeks working with him, about the dozen other small victories that had felt meaningful in the moment but hardly seemed worthy of recognition. What if I don't deserve this? The question escaped before Marcus could stop it, carrying with it all the doubt and self-questioning that his aunt's words had planted and watered over the years. "Son," Mr. Rodriguez said gently, "the fact that you're asking that question is exactly why you do deserve it. Real leaders, real change makers, they never think they're doing enough. They always wonder if they could do more." As Marcus walked home that evening, the nomination letter carefully folded in his backpack, he felt something shift inside him. The same streets looked different somehow, not less challenging, not suddenly transformed into something they weren't, but imbued with new possibility. For the first time in 3 years, he allowed himself to imagine a future where his aunt's assessment of him might be wrong, where being a mistake wasn't the final word on his story. The weeks leading up to the ceremony passed in a blur of nervous anticipation and careful secrecy. Marcus had decided not to tell his aunt about the award, knowing that her reaction would likely crush whatever fragile hope had begun to grow in his chest. Instead, he threw himself deeper into his work at the community center, as if proving his worth through action could somehow validate what others had already recognized. It was a gray December morning when everything began to unravel. Marcus was helping 10-year-old Deshaun with his reading when his phone buzzed insistently in his pocket. The caller ID showed his school's main number, which never meant good news. He stepped into the hallway, the familiar sounds of children's voices fading behind the heavy door. "Marcus Thompson." The voice belonged to Mrs. Patterson, the school secretary, whose tone could convey either comfort or doom depending on the circumstances. Today, it leaned heavily toward the latter. "Yes, ma'am. You need to come to the office immediately. Your aunt is here and she's quite upset." Marcus's stomach dropped like a stone thrown into deep water. He glanced back at Deshawn, who was still struggling with the same paragraph they'd been working on for 20 minutes, his small finger tracing each word with determined concentration. "Mr. Rodriguez," Marcus called out, catching the director's attention. "I have to go to school. Family emergency." The concern in Mr. Rodriguez's eyes was immediate and genuine. "Is everything okay? Do you need me to drive you?" "No, sir. I'll take the bus. Can you just keep an eye on Deshawn? He's really close to finishing that chapter." The ride to Cass Technical High School felt interminable, each stop prolonging the inevitable confrontation. Marcus stared out the frost-covered window at the familiar landscape of his neighborhood, the boarded-up storefronts, the murals painted on brick walls, the people bundled against the cold as they went about their daily routines. Everything looked the same, but he felt as though he was traveling toward a cliff's edge. The school's main office buzzed with its usual afternoon activity. Students coming and going, phones ringing, the copy machine churning out endless paperwork. But all of that faded into background noise when Marcus saw his aunt sitting in one of the plastic chairs reserved for visitors, her face a mask of controlled fury. "There he is," Dolores announced loudly enough for everyone in the office to hear. The community hero himself. Mrs. Patterson, a woman who'd seen enough family drama to fill several novels, gestured toward the principal's office with practiced discretion. "Why don't you all step in here where you can talk privately?" Principal Williams, a tall man with kind eyes and the patient demeanor required for his job, closed the door behind them and offered everyone a seat. The office smelled of coffee and old books, with afternoon sunlight streaming through windows that faced the school's courtyard. "Mrs. Henderson," Principal Williams began, using his aunt's married name. "I understand you have some concerns about Marcus's activities?" Dolores's laugh was sharp and bitter. "Concerns? That's one way to put it. I find out this morning that my nephew has been lying to me for months. Apparently he's some kind of a celebrity now, getting awards from the mayor, going to be on television." She turned to glare at Marcus. "When exactly were you planning to tell me about this?" Marcus felt the familiar sensation of shrinking, of becoming smaller under his aunt's withering gaze. "I was going to tell you." "When? After it was over? After you'd made me look like a fool to the whole neighborhood?" Her voice rose with each word. "Garcia next door comes knocking on my door this morning, all excited because she heard on the radio that someone from our street was getting an award. Imagine my surprise when I find out it's the nephew who's been sneaking around behind my back." Principal Williams cleared his throat gently. "Mrs. Henderson, with all due respect, Marcus's volunteer work and academic achievements are something to be proud of. This award recognizes—" "I don't need you to tell me what to be proud of," Dolores snapped, her attention shifting to the principal. "You don't live with him. You don't know what it's like to have someone in your house who thinks he's better than everyone else, who acts like he's too good for his own family." The words hit Marcus like physical blows, each one finding its mark in the carefully constructed armor he'd built around his heart. He thought about Deshawn, still struggling with his reading, and Jayla, whose face lit up every time she solved a math problem. He thought about the letter from Wayne State University, hidden in his bedroom like a secret treasure. He thought about his mother's voice, telling him he could be anything he wanted to be. "I never said I was better than anyone," Marcus said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "You don't have to say it. It's in everything you do. Volunteering at that community center instead of getting a real job. Staying after school for extra help instead of coming home to help with your cousins. Acting like you're going to college when you know damn well we can't afford it." Dolores leaned forward in her chair, her eyes blazing. "And now this award nonsense, like you're some kind of saint." "The award ceremony is next Friday," Principal Williams interjected, clearly trying to steer the conversation toward resolution. "It would mean a great deal to Marcus to have family support. He won't be going." Dolores's words fell like a gavel, final and unforgiving. "I'm done with this fantasy. It's time he learned to live in the real world." The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus could hear his own heartbeat, could feel the weight of dreams crumbling like old plaster. Through the principal's window, he watched students walking across the courtyard, their voices carried away by the December wind. "Auntie," Marcus said finally, surprised by the steadiness in his own voice. "This isn't about thinking I'm better than anyone. It's about trying to help kids who remind me of myself. It's about using whatever gifts I have to make things a little better for people who need it." "Gifts?" Dolores stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "The only gift you need to worry about is the gift of a roof over your head and food in your belly. And if you keep up with this nonsense, you might lose that too." As they left the school together, walking toward the bus stop in uncomfortable silence, Marcus realized that the awards ceremony had become more than just recognition for his community service. It had become a battleground for his future, a test of whether he would allow other people's limitations to define his possibilities. The December air was sharp against his face, but for the first time in weeks, Marcus felt a strange sense of clarity settling over him like freshly fallen snow. The Friday of the ceremony arrived with an unexpected warmth that made December feel almost like spring. Marcus woke before dawn, staring at the ceiling of his shared bedroom while Trevor slept peacefully in the bed across from him. The house was unusually quiet, with none of the typical morning chaos of crying babies and rushed breakfast preparations. His aunt had maintained her silence about the award for the entire week, treating him with a cold distance that somehow felt worse than her usual anger. She'd made it clear that he was expected to go to school, come home, and forget about the nonsense at City Hall. But as Marcus lay there, listening to the familiar sounds of the neighborhood waking up, garbage trucks rumbling down Michigan Avenue, the Garcia's radio playing softly next door, he felt something crystallize inside him. He wasn't going to miss this ceremony. At school, the day crawled by with agonizing slowness. During lunch, Marcus found himself in the guidance counselor's office, where Mrs. Chen had called him in for what she described as a check-in. "I heard about what happened with your aunt," she said gently, her desk covered with college brochures and scholarship applications. "I want you to know that your acceptance to Wayne State still stands, and we've been working on financial aid packages that could cover most of your expenses." Marcus nodded, but the words felt distant, abstract. How could he think about college when he couldn't even attend a ceremony recognizing his current achievements? "Mrs. Chen," he said quietly, "what if the people who are supposed to support you are the same ones holding you back?" The counselor leaned back in her chair, her expression thoughtful. "Marcus, sometimes the people who love us have their own fears and limitations that prevent them from seeing our potential. That doesn't make their love less real, but it also doesn't make their limitations your responsibility to carry." At 3 o'clock, as students poured out of Cass Tech into the December afternoon, Marcus made a decision that would have seemed impossible just weeks earlier. Instead of catching the bus home, he walked the 12 blocks to the community center, his backpack heavy with textbooks and the weight of defiance. Mr. Rodriguez was waiting for him with a knowing smile and a garment bag hanging from his office door. "I figured you might need something appropriate to wear tonight," he said, unzipping the bag to reveal a navy blue suit that looked like it would fit perfectly. "Mr. Rodriguez, I can't—" "It's not charity, son. It's an investment. Besides, it belonged to my nephew, and is just hanging in my closet collecting dust." The older man's eyes grew serious. "Marcus, I know this is difficult with your family situation, but sometimes doing the right thing requires courage that goes beyond comfort." As the afternoon shifted toward evening, the community center began to empty. The usual after-school chaos gave way to an unusual quiet, broken only by the sound of Marcus getting ready in the center's small bathroom. The suit fit better than anything he'd ever worn, transforming his reflection into someone who looked older, more confident, more worthy of recognition. At 6 o'clock, a car pulled up outside, Mr. Rodriguez's aging Honda Civic, clean and ready for the occasion. "Your chariot awaits," the director said with a grin that couldn't quite hide his own nervousness. The drive to City Hall took them through the heart of downtown Detroit, past the Renaissance Center's towering glass facades and the Fox Theater's restored marquee. The city's lights were beginning to twinkle in the gathering dusk, creating a backdrop that felt both familiar and magical. "Are you ready for this?" Mr. Rodriguez asked as they pulled into the parking garage beneath City Hall. Marcus took a deep breath, thinking about Jayla's excited smile when she'd mastered long division, about Deshaun's pride when he'd read his first complete chapter, about all the small moments that had led to this larger recognition. "I think so." The ceremony hall was more elegant than Marcus had imagined, with crystal chandeliers and dark wood paneling that spoke of history and importance. Local news cameras were positioned around the room, their bright lights creating an atmosphere of official significance. Marcus recognized several faces from the community center, parents of kids he'd tutored, other volunteers, even some of his teachers from school. Mayor Davidson, a woman in her 50s with silver hair and a warm handshake, greeted each award recipient personally. When she reached Marcus, her smile was genuine and knowing. "Marcus Thompson," she said, "I've heard remarkable things about your work with Detroit's youth. You should be very proud of what you've accomplished." "Thank you, ma'am. I just try to help where I can." "That's exactly the kind of humility that makes great leaders," she replied. "Your community is lucky to have you." As the ceremony began, Marcus found himself thinking about his aunt's words, about being called a mistake, about the constant reminder that he was a burden rather than a blessing, but surrounded by people who had seen value in his efforts, who had taken time from their own lives to celebrate his contributions. Those harsh assessments began to feel less like truce and more like fear. When his name was called, Marcus walked to the podium with steady steps, the television lights warm on his face. Mayor Davidson presented him with a crystal award that caught the light and threw rainbows across the stage. The applause was thunderous, but what moved him most were the specific voices he could pick out. Mr. Rodriguez cheering loudly, several parents from the community center calling his name, even some of his classmates who had somehow found out about the ceremony. During his brief acceptance speech, Marcus spoke about the kids at the community center, about the importance of believing in young people's potential, about how helping others had taught him to believe in himself. He didn't mention his family situation or the obstacles he'd overcome. Instead, he focused on gratitude and hope, on the power of community support and the responsibility that came with recognition. As the evening wound down and the cameras were packed away, Mr. Rodriguez approached with tears in his eyes. "Your mother would be so proud," he said simply. Walking out into the December night, award in hand and suit still crisp, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in 3 years, a sense of belonging that had nothing to do with where he lived and everything to do with who he was choosing to become. The city lights stretched out before him like promises, and for the first time since his mother's death, the future felt bright with possibility rather than heavy with limitation. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight, Marcus Thompson was exactly where he belonged,